Privyet. Hi, I'm Gareth and I'm the host of the Russian History Podcast, a brand new weekly podcast that will cover the history of Russia and her peoples from prehistory right through to the turn of the 21st century. Now, before we get into the bones of the first episode, I just wanted to publish a few disclaimers. I absolutely want to make it clear that I'm not a professional historian, nor do I have any academic training in either this field of history or indeed any field of history. I've also never recorded anything before, so things will be very, very raw and around the edges until I find my rhythm and flow. I do hope you can bear with me until I have found that. I'm very much a happy amateur. Now, I'm using this podcast as a means of not just to learn myself, but I'm also hoping to share my learnings with you, the listener, and as the podcast grows, to create a forum, a community, for hopefully sharing our learnings together. I do hope you continue to join me on this journey. Now, the reason why I want to cover this period of time is because it's absolutely fascinating. It's a tale of revolutions, of Vikings, nomadic raiders, of democracy where you'd least expect to find it, and it's a real melting pot of culture. I'm aided in this gargantuan task by my wife, who very luckily happens to be Russian, and she's provided me with all kinds of help, from pronunciation through to explaining the context of events, and obviously giving me the love, the support and the motivation to get this gargantuan task off the ground. And I've also got the help of Mishka. Mishka's the family cat. Mishka means little bear in Russian, and she's currently curled up on my lap, so you may hear from her from time to time as she lets me know if she wants belly rubs or feeding. Now, that's enough about me and the cat. Let's get into the subject of our story. So before we go into the history, let's look at prehistoric findings. Now, back in the year 2006, a 1.5 million year old Alder-1 flint tool was discovered in the Dagestan-Akusha region of the North Caucasus. Now, if you're struggling to visualise this on a map, if you think of where Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan is, the Caucasus are the mountain range that runs north and indeed through these countries, and the Dagestan region of Russia is immediately north of this. Now, finding a tool 1.5 million years old demonstrates the presence of early humans in Russia from a very early time. Now, the Alder-1, or Mode 1, is the earliest widespread stone tool that's found in prehistory. They're, as you can imagine, with fairly simple tools, and they're usually made with a flake or a few flakes of chipped stone, and they're made from chipping two stones together. Now, Alder-1 tools were used during the lower Paleolithic period, so 2.6 to around 1.5 million years ago, which puts our finding right on the boundary of this particular historical period. And they were used by ancient hominids, not just in Russia, but across much of Africa, South Asia, the Middle East and Europe. Alder-1 tools, sometimes referred to as pebble tools because, well, they look like pebbles. This discovery of some of the earliest evidence for the presence of nautically modern humans found anywhere in Europe was reported in 2007, and this was from the Kostensky archaeological site near the Don River in Russia. And again, if you're struggling to pinpoint this here on a map, Don River runs through central Russia and touches on eastern Ukraine, and this was dated to around about 40,000 years old. Now, the Arctic Russia was reached about 40,000 years ago, so Arctic Russia is anywhere in Russia that's above the Arctic Circle. That Russia was also home to some of the last surviving Neanderthals. This was revealed by the discovery of the partial skeleton of a Neanderthal ancient in Mazimyanskaya cave in Aniga, which was carbon dated to only 29,000 years ago. So this evidence suggests that in Arctic Russia, modern humans and Neanderthals were almost coexisting, or could have been coexisting, for around 11,000 years. In 2008, Russian archaeologists from the Institute for Archaeology and Ethnology of Novosibirsk, working at the site of the Denisova cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia. And if you're struggling to pinpoint the Altai Mountains form an offshoot of the Urals, and that's in between Russia and Kazakhstan. And they uncovered a 40,000-year-old small bone fragment from the fifth finger of a juvenile hominin. Further DNA analysis revealed to be a previously unknown species of human, which was named the Denisova homin. Now, as this is the Russian History Podcast, I think we spent enough time discussing prehistory, and I hope you've enjoyed this first episode, which, as it's much shorter than the aimed episode length, between 20 to 30 minutes in length, will be entitled Episode 0, and will form a basis for future listeners to decide whether or not they want to embark on this epic journey with me. I hope you consider joining me next week, where we can finally jump into the history as we begin to look at the peoples and cultures that inhabited Russia in a historical period. We can begin to look at the Eastern Slavs, or East Slavs, as we look into their culture, their religion, the areas that they inhabited, and the impact they had on the world. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, and even if you didn't, I would love to hear your feedback. If you can spare the time, I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a review on iTunes. Not only will this help the podcast grow, it will also be invaluable to me in helping refine my presenting style. If you want to help out with the running costs of the show, for example, helping with our hosting costs and the costs of books and texts that are needed in providing the source material that makes the show work, you can find us over on Patreon at the Russian History Podcast, where you can become a member and receive bonuses such as the show transcript and episodes on demand. By that I mean you can receive episodes as and when they're ready, as they've been recorded, rather than needing to wait for the episodes on a weekly basis as they're released to the wider public. If you'd like to provide any feedback directly, you can contact me at the RussianHistoryPodcast@gmail.com. So that email address is the RussianHistoryPodcast@gmail.com, and that's all one word. Thanks again for listening, and ta-ra for now.